Good evening. COP29 is behind us, and what a roller coaster of a journey that was. The end stages of the event gave us drama, and for a brief moment it looked like negotiators might leave Baku empty-handed. Well, fortunately, negotiators did manage to break the deadlock and achieve a significant breakthrough, a $300 billion package for developing nations. I'm Guy Schoen, and joining me today to discuss the outcome and the legacy of COP29 is our very own Orkan Amishov and our very special guest, Elnur Soltanov, Deputy Energy Minister of Azerbaijan and Chief Executive Officer of COP29. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Soltanov, welcome. It's nice to see you again back on the show. Can we just start by getting your overall reflections on the event? And I'd also like you to comment on those parties that perhaps were not satisfied with the results.
Definitely. So from the very start, COP29 presidency made it very clear that we have three major goals to achieve. Climate finance, Article 6, and loss and damage. And we delivered on all of them. Climate finance probably cannot be compared to the other two. Article 6 really comes close second, but maybe we will discuss that. But in CQG, why it is important? This is the first time from 1992 that at COPs, parties got together to discuss climate finance. It never happened before. So this was uncharted territory. True, in 2009, in Denmark, there was a decision on this 100 billion. But it was not a decision, by the way. I said decision, but again, I'm taking it back. It was basically a declaration. It did not involve any discussions. And to be honest with you, climate finance, and I think we discussed this before, is the thing that keeps global climate architecture together. Without that, it wouldn't have happened. There wouldn't have been this 1992 UNFCCC. There wouldn't have been Paris Agreement. Why that's the case? It's related to the fact that there are two categories of the countries: those who polluted and developed, those who did not pollute, did not get development, and at the same time are bearing the brunt of the climate calamities. So unless there is this justice between them, or as we call common but differentiated responsibilities, it won't fly, right? There wouldn't be any collective action. What enables this collective action possible is climate finance, because I think the ultimate measure of justice is really, in this particular case, is really finance. So this was the first time, never happened before, and it was expectedly a very difficult process, but we have been ready to tackle it, because this was, I would tell you that and this is very important, the negotiation process never went beyond the difficulty level that we predicted before. So it was part and parcel of our scenarios. We expected it to be moving in that direction. We knew that, as every negotiation, this is a strategic game, right? They come up with their tactics, but usually they reveal their strategy in the last day, negotiation tactic that they are using, or strategy that they are using. So it was very difficult, but to be honest with you, we never really had a doubt that things are moving properly. The only problem we had was time. So timing-wise, especially quorum-wise, we understood that that's what we are fighting against. Not that the positions were clear, preferences were clear, expectations and reality was clear, and I think everybody was almost on the same page. The issue was, can we pull this off in time, and on time actually, so that it's not too late. It happened. Regarding the second part of your question, I mean, there is this very famous phrase that people would jokingly say about COPs and about really multi-level negotiations, that it's impossible to make everybody happy, right? The purpose usually in these kinds of negotiations with around 200 sovereign party states involved is to make sure that there's a decision and everybody is unhappy. So it's very normal that some countries really wanted more than this 300 billion. And to be honest with you, they have a scientific base to say so. Because if you look at this independent high-level group, expert group, which was actually initiated by COP20 earlier COP presidencies, the numbers they put forward was a little bit different than this $300 billion. So developing country parties, when they were asking for more, they had every right. We got 1.3 billion right in line, aligned with science. 300 billion could have been higher, but again, at the end of the day, this is really about parties negotiating and finding a fine balance between ambition and reality. So I think it was really good number. We tripled the number that we had before, the finance of 100 billion. All in all, this is the first time such a difficult question has been answered. We rose up to the challenge, and I'm saying again, never ever to me in COP history. Definitely, I mean, there are some important milestones, right? Paris Agreement was a milestone because Paris Agreement, as you know, is not a separate agreement, it's an extension of UNFCCC. But after Paris Agreement, I would say that this was the most important decision, most faithful decision that happened, and now we have to work on the details so that it becomes a reality.
And one of those details, part of the achievement, in fact, an achievement in its own right, was the unlocking of carbon markets, something that's been discussed at many previous COPs, discussed at Glasgow, discussed at Sharm el-Sheikh, a bit of a stalemate for a number of years, and then finally now unlocked, operationalised at COP29. Can you tell us a bit about how that works and how that will change the game for investing in the future?
Definitely. Again, Paris Agreement is a really good agreement, right? UNFCCC of 1992 is generic. It's a parent agreement. It tells you what we need to be doing, but it's not very concrete. The concreteness was achieved with the Paris Agreement, again, an extension of UNFCCC. And the Paris Agreement, so far, till COP29, almost every major pillar and aspect of Paris Agreement has been operationalized, right? There have been two that were remaining dormant. One of them was Article 6, the other was Loss and Damage Fund. So therefore, Article 6 actually has been discussed since the Paris Agreement for 9 years. And why it is important? Usually this mitigation is the heart and part and parcel. Beyond that, it's the heart of the Paris Agreement, because mitigation is about really reducing and removing greenhouse gas emissions. Without that, there is no solution to the climate crisis. And this is without any prejudice to adaptation. It's equal as important, but if you want to solve climate crisis, you have to remove and reduce greenhouse gases. And usually this happens within national borders. But the problem is, national borders being what they are, you cannot benefit from the economies of scale of the global scope, right? You cannot unleash all this competition, all this innovation across the globe. And suppose in the United Kingdom, for instance, to remove 1 ton of carbon dioxide might cost, for instance, $500. But for a country in Africa, in the Congo Basin, the same thing could cost about $50, right? So why don't you reduce carbon dioxide in the most efficient way, right? Why don't you unleash this global level innovation and efficiency? And at the same time, what is great about Article 6 is that it also enables you to channel finance from developed part of the countries to developing countries. And also part of the transactions are supposed to be going into the adaptation fund. So all of these things made really Article 6 very important. And as I said, it was one of the two dormant weapons against climate change that hasn't been operationalized yet. And so decisions taken on 6.2 and 6.4, one of them is about bilateral carbon trading, 6.4 is about this regulated global carbon trading, right? So we did everything to operationalize them, and in 2025 there's every reason for it to become fully operational. The same thing with loss and damage. Loss and damage again took off in Sharm el-Sheikh. We got really close at COP28, but this is the year when it became almost fully operational, and again we are expecting to be up and running at 2025.
And as well as finance, transparency is also another important element, something that's been much discussed, and some progress in this area also at COP29.
Well, transparency, again, Guy, this is what happens, right? If you simplify issues at the global level regarding climate action, is do something and enable me to do something. And let's make sure that what we are doing and how we are enabling others is transparently communicated, because it requires a lot of transaction, a lot of mutual actions. And these actions depend on each other. When we say at the heart of the COP presidencies, COP29 presidencies, vision was the motto of enhance ambition and enable action, right? What does it mean? It says that, okay, action is important, but also there should be enablers. But to make sure that there is action and enablers, parties should see that it's really happening, right? There's a lot of need for transparency, because unless I understand that you are really taking climate action, I'm not willing to help you with finance, technology, and means of implementation. And on the part of the developing world, unless they understand that this is clearly, because for instance, we always say that there is no definition of climate finance. We talk about 100 billion or 300 billion. What exactly is it? How do we measure it, right? All of these issues create a lot of problems, but you talk, but you don't show us how you are measuring. There's no transparency. So transparency is important, both in terms of climate action and in terms of climate support, finance included. Without that, it doesn't move forward. So it really is the thing, one of the pillars of the Paris Agreement, without which you cannot move forward. And I think Baku did a great thing. We launched this platform, Transparency, Global Transparency Platform. And currently the document, if you are not tired with the abbreviations, the so-called BTRs. So BTRs has to be there every 2 years for everybody to see what others are doing and how others are supporting the process. And I think one of the greatest legacies of the COP29 will be, because it was totally our initiative, will be this global transparency initiative that we are going to be pushing and helping everybody to make sure that transparency is there, which enables, again, for parties to take action, also to support that action.
Well, let me just now bring in the king of COP29 acronyms, Orkan Amishov. Orkan, you wanted to look at a particular area.
Yeah, Mr. Soltanov, there was a moment towards the latter stages of the negotiations when it appeared to all of us that the chasm between developed and developing countries was so pronounced, so insurmountable to deal with, that we felt that negotiations were on the verge of collapse. What made a last-ditch compromise solution possible?
Well, I think, as I always said, this is like a marathon. COPs are really the crescendo of the year-long climate negotiations. And unless you communicate with parties, unless you map their preferences, unless you have scenarios for all possible outcomes, it's impossible to put things together in 2 weeks' time. What happened? I mean, everything, as I was saying before, everything was, I would say, going according to the plan. One thing that really got to the border of issues and took us to the brink of some very critical situations was timing, right? Because certain parties revealed the concrete numbers very late, and you cannot push them, you cannot force them. You need to respect, because these are sovereign parties. Again, you have to be acting as the host country and the leader of the COP processes for this year. You have to act according to Paris Agreement and UNFCCC. You cannot go beyond that. So timing-wise, the fact that that number from one of the parties came a little late, that created some kind of timing problem. But again, it wasn't really about preferences. It wasn't about reconciling those preferences, but time was really short, and which was, I think, in one of the last speeches of the COP29 president, that was really very clearly expressed. But again, it went back to where it should be, and I wouldn't say we were surprised, and I wouldn't say that we were happier than we were supposed to be and more surprised than we were supposed to be till the end.
And Guy earlier mentioned that. We heard some people saying that no deal would be preferable to a bad deal. What is this thinking behind this, you think? What does underpin this argument?
There are two things. First, again, every side, these are strategic game theory laden processes, right? So everybody is holding their cards closer to their chest. And it's really game. Again, legitimate and legal, but still it's a game. So this idea was probably used by certain parties to make sure that they can squeeze as much amount as they could, which is legitimate, acceptable, and understandable. And at the same time, it was a cry on the side of the climate activists, and I really appreciate them, because my sincere belief is that all this climate sensitivity started with climate activists, with civil society, and without them, we are not close to where we should be right now in terms of tackling the climate crisis and moving towards 1.5, to which there is no alternative. But at the same time, we wouldn't have been here without the pressure and push that is coming from climate activists, from civil society. So it was very much appreciated. The tension, the nice and creative tension they created really helped us. But at the same time, to me, at least on the side of the certain parties, it was a tactic to use to maximize their gains, which is very normal.
UN climate chief Simon Still hailed this outcome as an insurance policy for humanity, but he also said that the insurance policy only works when premiums are paid in full and on time. Do you think that they will be paid in full and on time?
Well, that's a very big question, right? So if you look at the fine lines, so there's a written decision available for everybody to look at regarding NCQG. That was one of the issues that certain parties and non-party stakeholders are raising. The good news is that it's not much different than the earlier commitment and wording, because numbers are really meaningful within the wording context that they come with, right? So there is this concern that the language was not sufficiently strong to create this, I would say, binding commitments on the part of the developed countries. But at the same time, again, you cannot go beyond the principles. I want so many things, but right now the guidance is coming from UNFCCC and Paris Agreement regarding this particular issue. I think uphill battle, again, we reached a certain milestone, very important, very good, but now the challenge is to make sure that every penny out there, promised penny, is delivered. So it will require a lot of discussion. As you know, this $300 billion is supposed to be there by 2035. And this $100 billion decision made in Copenhagen was supposed to be reached by 2020. It was reached in 2022. But certain organizations like Oxfam says that it wasn't reached actually, right? So there's a lot of debate related to the fact that we don't have this definition, we don't have transparency going on. So again, it's a never-ending struggle. We don't say that it's over, we are done. We say that the mission that was on COP29 presidency accomplished. Now let's take a nap for maybe a couple of hours and move forward to solve next problem, which is about really implementing the promises made.
Indeed. And as we understand, Azerbaijan is determined to increase its renewable capacity to 30% by 2030 and also slashes its greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2050. How do you envision Azerbaijan's COP legacy? How do you envision COP legacy for Azerbaijan?
Well, I mean, to me, it's part and parcel of leading by example, whether you are practicing what you preach. And those numbers you uttered, I think we should do more. Mm-hmm. Like, this is my personal opinion and also my opinion as the Deputy Energy Minister of Azerbaijan. But my sense is that we are going to be reaching this 30% before 2030. We don't say officially, but probably it will be much earlier. And actually the message that the President of Azerbaijan, Excellency Ilham Aliyev, gave, those numbers were larger and bigger than the numbers we are entertaining at the ministerial level. So that we take it as a new order by the President of Azerbaijan. That means that it will be above and beyond 30%, which is good news for everybody, including Azerbaijan. Regarding 40% by 2050, I think we could do more. We should do more. So stay tuned to our next NDC 3.0, which should be published by COP decisions by February 2025. And Azerbaijan promised to publish it earlier than deadline. I think we are going to have more ambitious commitments by Azerbaijan, and I think that's what we should be doing.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Thank you.
Mr. Soltanov, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Well, that's all we have time for on this hour. Thank you for watching, and we wish you a very pleasant evening ahead.